Okay. So, hi everyone. I am Lauren Bright. I'm the program manager for Desert Compost in Coachella Valley and the Inland Empire region of California. Welcome to our Bugs and Compost workshop hosted by Ian Moreland and Nichelle Wentz. These two people seem to be very passionate experts from Project New Village Growers Collective, where they contribute to a healthier, more resilient community through sustainable urban agriculture. And just a brief history, I met Ian on a Desert Compost field trip down to Project New Village and instantly loved his enthusiasm for bugs and the garden that he tends to there. So I reached out and asked a question if he'd be willing to host a bugs and compost workshop for us, since it was really highly requested in our region. And I didn't know that I was getting two experts in my ask. So we are excited to also welcome Nichelle Wentz, and they are co-founders of WenMor Urban Farms. And thanks for being here, Ian and Nichelle, for your work and dedication to the planet and the creatures that coexist with us. Take it away.
Thank you, Moreland. So you see me two places because I wanted to say hi and have everyone see my video. I am going to log off on here and then just manage the PowerPoint, but I wanted to say hello so everyone can see my face. So I will share now. Sorry, I need to unmute myself first, and then I'll do it. Ooh, show, so let me begin. Okay, so welcome to Insects in Your Compost, Guest or Pest, presented by myself, Nichelle Wentz in Moreland, and I founded, like Lauren said, a farm here on our property. And so this is just a little bit about us. So we have our Instagrams on here as well as email address if you ever want to get in contact with us. But as Lauren said, so Ian is the green space manager at Project New Village. Ian will talk about Project New Village in a second. We're both native San Diegans. Ian is also a garden educator with Sage Garden Project. He's also an insect lover and an entomologist at heart. He's a master gardener, master composter. We are both soil farmers. We're both members of the Project New Village Growers Collective. And we both completed a permaculture design course with the permaculture lab. And we both founded WenMor Urban Farm. I'm also a project manager at an aeronautical company. And then I'm also the vice president of a community service group down here in San Diego called the Paradise Hills Foundation, where our mission is to help beautify our area of San Diego. And then I'm currently pursuing a horticulture therapy certificate through the UCLA Extension program. So Ian, talking about Project New Village and Sage.
All right. The Project New Village, uh, been around for a little bit. Our current focus is centered around food justice in Southeast San Diego. Um, some of the language that you might hear when folks kind of talk about that is something like food sovereignty, food apartheid. Essentially, Southeast San Diego is an area where through uh, intentional acts was kind of put in the outlier through like things like redlining, and essentially that area there's no access to organic local produce or just clean healthy produce. A lot of times people go to the grocery stores that are in the area. Now you hear people complain about um, how quickly the food might go bad when it gets home. And so what we've done as an organization is we've created a mobile farmers market that moves around Southeast San Diego. And we've connected with local growers through like the Growers Collective. And so it's focused on local and hyper-local produce that folks in the neighborhood can have access to. We found that 70% of Southeast San Diego is elderly. And so the times that we have at this market are the times when the elderly are most active. So that's kind of Project New Village, like our passion, our mission, to create um, sustainable and equitable practices through food sovereignty, because we believe that whoever controls your food controls you. And so the goal is to take control of our food source and food supply chain and have a positive impact on our community. So that's Project New Village. Do you want to go forward?
Well, and also, so we're soil farmers. I don't know if anyone knows that term, but so we both soil farm through with Food to Soil, which is so we're down here in San Diego, and it's a composting collective down here in San Diego. And it kind of taught us our composting, like all the stuff that we know about composting. So we did an apprenticeship with them. And so then we actually had a hub in Paradise Hills, which is a area in San Diego, where we would compost for our neighbors. And then also it was kind of a little bit of a side hustle, but it wasn't like you would pay your rent from it. But it kind of started to dwindle when the law was passed here in California, where the cities had to start composting. So now we just compost at our own house. And then we started WenMor Urban Farm earlier this year. We live on a little bit under than half an acre in San Diego proper. So that's pretty big for San Diego. Our vision is to have a food forest. So we planted about 30 fruit trees earlier this year. And then we got a lot more trees to go, but we wanted to make sure that we got those in.
Really?
Yeah. So, Ian, anything else on this one?
No, I'm okay.
Okay, so I wanted to do some icebreaker riddles. So you can either just unmute yourselves and say it out loud, or you could just put it in the chat. So the first riddle is tiny. Also, these are all insect or bug related, as a hint. So tiny yet strong, I march in a crew, carrying loads more than a few. Who am I?
Ant.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, next one. I'm not a priest, but I like to pray, waiting for dinner to come my way. Who am I?
Praying mantis.
Good job. Okay, I'm hoping this last one is a little bit harder. So you see me blink, but not my eyes. I wink and weak to fraternize. And if I wink at her just right, then I may find my love tonight. What am I?
A blah, blah, blah.
Ooh, I stumped you guys.
No,
Some answers, but not correct. When I see grub, I see earthworm, I see moth. Oh, someone's got it there in the chat. I see firefly.
Yay, it's a firefly. Okay, so we'll get started with the meat of the presentation. So we're going to talk about an ecosystem, right? So an ecosystem is the biological community of interacting organisms and their physical environment. So also known as like it's an interconnected network. So a compost pile in itself is based on the breakdown of materials, and in itself is its own ecosystem. So here we have some definitions that would help us going forward. So we have fungus. It's a spore-producing organisms that feed on organic matter, including molds, yeast, mushrooms, and toadstools. We got bacteria, which is a single-celled organism which help break down the compost and creates heat. We have nematodes. These are non-segmented worms found in the phylum is like a family, nematoda. These can be microscopic or they can be visible to the eye. You have invertebrates, which is any animal that does not have a backbone. Now you have insects, which we're talking about today. a small invertebrate animal with 6 legs, a segmented body, and usually 2 pairs of wings. And then actually, bugs and insects are not the same. So a bug is a type of an insect that has a piercing mouth part. And so all bugs are a type of insect, but not all insects are bugs. So, but, we all kind of just use insects and bugs interchangeably, little things that aren't mammals or reptiles or birds, and, kind of freak us out sometimes. So here is the ecosystem of a compost pile. And then here are some of the insects and organisms that you may see. So decomposition is the process of rotting, and then a decomposing organism is the organism that breaks down the dead matter and releases the nutrients. And so in this ecosystem, the consumers are linked by like what eats what in this food web, and they're classified by like what eats what as well. So you have 3 levels. You have the primary, secondary, and tertiary. So the primary consumers, these are the organisms that actually eat the dead plant material, and sometimes they may eat other primary consumers. So you have microscopic decomposers. So those are your fungus, bacteria, and nematodes. And then you also have larger physical decomposers: snails, slugs, earthworms, millipedes, pill bugs, and mites. Your secondary consumers are the organisms that eat your primary consumers. They also help regulate the number of primary consumers that you have. So examples of those are springtails, flatworms, mold mites, and feather-winged beetles. And then you have tertiary consumers, and those are the ones that can eat primary and secondary, and sometimes other tertiary consumers. So these are your more predatory organisms. So you have centipedes and predatory mites and rose beetles. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. So you have these 3: the primary, secondary, and tertiary. And so now we're going to get into what we're calling the guests, or the things that you would like to see in your compost pile. Ian, are you on mute?
Sorry about that. I forgot. I put it on mute. My phone was beeping. Yes. So the first on our list here are the beetles. I guess depending on your experience, you may see them as a guest or a pest. I like to see them as guests. We have our predaceous ground beetles and road beetles. They can come in a variety of colors. Sometimes you might see them in green, maybe brown, black. Um, I don't think everyone doesn't always realize that beetles eat other insects, other bugs. So when you see them in your piles, there's a good chance that they're helping out. So just kind of keep that in mind. Even if you have you're not very fond of insects in general, you kind of like, some people are kind of grossed out. Just keep in mind that there's a good chance that they're actually helping um, your pile. So in this picture here, we have this green one up top that is also known as a fig beetle or a green peach beetle. The white grub is one of the stages of the larva stage. I like them in my compost. They're great composters. They great at decomposing the matter. Uh, Maybe not so much in the rest of your yard. So usually when I find them, if you find them throughout your yard, I just move them over to my compost pile. Um, they do really well at helping break down organic matter and kind of helping building soil and your compost. Also, I mean, if you have say peaches or maybe fig beetles or fig tree, you may not want them there because the other side is that as they emerge as adults, then they may get into other parts of your yard. But in the compost pile, they're pretty great. Um, we also have the rove beetle is a voracious eater. That's the top right. They've got some pretty cool. I did some looking at some of the other kind of interesting things about them. Uh, they have 2 sets of jaws. They have wings, but they're indiscriminate eaters. So while they do eat a lot of the pests in your bed, they may also eat something that you may consider a friend. So there's that side of them. Um, and they often can imitate scorpions. They tend to do that same kind of body motion to look like as if they're going to whip out like a stinger, like that kind of overarching motion, but they are they don't have a stinger. Um, let's see. Um, they're very helpful in limiting the outbreaks in your other populations of your pests. So, like I said, they're really good at maintaining um, the other pests in your pile. The downside might be that they're grubs, because they're grubs or in their grub larva stage. You may get some visitors such as like skunks or chipmunks. The raccoons love to come and dig through everything. Sometimes out of my yard, I look out and you'll see like the crows going through our yard, and kind of we have a lot of mulch around, and they're just picking out grubs out of the yard. So if that's something that you're not interested in, then just kind of keep that in mind. We can go next slide. The black soldier fly. This is kind of a favorite. I enjoy uh, watching them as they come into our pile. Typically, I would suggest if you there's a few things people use with black soldier flies for. Sometimes people use them as food for chickens. We have chickens, so they're great for chicken feed. But in your compost pile, they are voracious composters. They tend to gravitate towards a more of a protein meaty diet. So they also will eat other insects, which could possibly be your worms if you have like a worm bin. It's not ideal to keep them in the same space together. So it's something to keep in mind. It's more likely that you would want to kind of create a separate system for them, but they also do pollinate. So there's some nice benefits there. Ouch. Sorry. Let's see. Is there anything I want to share there? No, next slide. All right, so our isopods, pill and the sow bug, they're also decomposers. Just as a note, they tend to be present in soils with heavy metals. They're good at removing heavy metals from the soil. So that's just something to keep in mind. Um, through their consumption process, they're helpful to enrich your compost. They add helpful bacteria. In small numbers, they're okay. In larger numbers, you may find that they can be detrimental to parts of your garden. Generally, I think that's if you tend to kind of keep a clean, neat garden, then sometimes you don't have any organic decaying matter for them to enjoy, and so they make their way to other parts of your garden. But this is why you would see them in your compost pile, because they do enjoy decaying matter at large. Um, next slide.
Okay, so these guys are millipedes, and they're technically not insects. They are closely related to lobsters, crayfish, and shrimp, which is interesting. They are worm-like, and they have rounded bodies. And so they actually are segmented, and each segment has two pairs of jointed legs. So their legs kind of look like they're tucked under them, and then they move in a wave. And actually, something interesting about them is they're not poisonous, but many species have glands that produce like these irritating and sticky fluid, and it can actually cause an allergic reaction in some people. But they are good to see in your compost pile. They help with bacteria production. They feed on the decaying matter, and then their digestive system, adds good bacteria back into the soil or to the compost. They're also good at soil aeration, so that when they're going through your compost, that's the waving motion of them moving around. It helps to break up and aerate the material. But like a lot of things that are great for compost, they're not necessarily good for your garden because they're eating the organic matter. So they can damage plants if the soil dries out. They can start eating the roots of the living plants. And then they can also damage seedlings or things like fruit or any kind of vegetables that have contact with the ground. So we have red worms or red wiggler worms. So if you're doing vermicomposting, then you should know about these guys. Um, they're the most common compost worm. And so actually, there are other composting worms. And so composting worms have evolved or from the earthworm to, or have not evolved, but have adapted from other earthworms to eat decaying and organic matter. So you won't really see these guys in soil because they're eating the decaying matter. These guys are particularly good for our environment because they're really resilient and they're hardy or temperature hardy. So their ideal temperature range is 55 to 90, but they can go as low as 40 and as high as like 100. And also, they mate and lay eggs every 7 to 10 days. Contrast to like other species of earthworms that only mate once or twice a year. And also, they are native to Europe, but they're not considered an invasive species here because they don't have a negative impact in the wild. So red wiggler worms are really good at composting because they basically eat and then we use their poop as it's worm castings, and it's just like a really great soil conditioner. It's really great for soil health. It's loaded with organic matter, and then like the bacteria from their gut just like increases the soil structure and enhances the ability to hold water, and it also even helps fight off plant diseases, and it makes the nutrient availability higher. And then, so red wigglers are the most common composting worms, but we're not, I don't have like a slide on it, but other composting worms, if you're interested, are there's blue worms, African night crawlers, Alabama or Georgia jumpers, and I don't know how to say this word. It's EPIGEIC, epigeic worms. But they're all other composting worms. But when I was reading about them, they do better in more tropical weather, or they're not as durable, or they don't procreate as fast as the red wiggler. So then we also have slugs and snails. So slugs are actually evolved snails without any, they don't have a shell. And these guys are also not insects. They are mollusks, and they're related to octopus and oysters. They're attracted to warm and moist climates, and they generally feed at night. But these guys are good for your compost because they can help break down tougher material. And they're also, snails are known for their mucousy trails, and so that is actually calcium rich, and it just helps add the essential calcium to your soil. But of course, as things that love to munch on plants, they're not very good for your garden in large amounts. They do eat decaying matter, but they also really like young seedlings. So be careful of that.
All right. It's back to me. All right. So next up is our springtail. If you've seen these in your compost pile, then I would say kudos to you. You have a pretty healthy um, ecosystem within your compost. Um, I kind of forgot about these guys when we were doing our soil farmer training. I remember seeing them a lot at the site where we did composting. But after we were kind of prepping for this, I was reminded that currently where our Mount Hope site, I don't think I've seen very many springtails. So that gives me some thoughts about things about how to correct or maybe make some adjustments with our compost, because I definitely remember seeing these guys bouncing around. Um, in the compost when we did our training. So they're small, kind of a wingless insect. So they're noticed by their ability to jump. It's very obvious. Like, they're really small, but you just see this little white thing like just bouncing all over the place. Um, they're really good at eating decaying matter and breaking it down. Um, they essentially almost kind of like secrete soil. Uh, they're growth of beneficial microbes in the compost. I mean, they stimulate growth. I'm sorry, they stimulate growth in the compost pile. They're great at nutrient cycling because of the way they ingest and secrete the nutrients that add and build nitrogen to the soil um, in large numbers, as most of the insects. They can damage plant roots and sometimes kill off young seedlings. Let me see. Yeah. Okay, next slide.
Okay, so the next section is the pests, but we wanted to point out that all insects, bugs, critters have a role in the ecosystem of the environment. So we're calling these guys pests because generally don't want to see a lot of them in your compost. So it's fine to see a lot. I mean, it's fine to see a few of them, but to see a lot maybe cause some concern. But we would like to point out, everyone has a job and a role. And then also, I know we talked about ecosystems like slide backs, but when I lost my train of thought, I wanted to say that if you had a lot of secondary consumers, it means that your pile is really healthy because you have a lot of primary consumers to feed your secondary consumers. So on to the pest. Also, were there any questions that you guys had so far? So if you guys have any questions, you can just unmute yourself or add them or put them in the chat and we can answer them as we go. But there is also time at the end for any questions. Okay, so
I
Hold
have
on,
a
I saw a
question.
hand.
Yeah, I had a question. It was to do with one of the other slides. You did mention that let me go back through my notes. I'm taking notes, guys. I think is it beetles? I think you said beetles. One of the friendly things that
Mhm.
helps with bacterial, like with adding good bacteria. I was wondering if you could elaborate on that. Do you remember what I'm talking about? You said
worms,
was it the was
worms
it,
do that.
I think it was before worms. Let's
Hmm.
see. The first thing
Well,
was
so
Oh, it might have
worms
been the.
add good bacteria because they eat and poop it out.
no
Snails
no it was
possess free
it was
growth.
isopods.
Isopods, huh? I think it was
Because
Oh,
isopod.
okay.
you just mentioned that isopods were they enrich compost with helpful bacteria. Is it enriching compost that already has helpful bacteria, or they help enrich the compost by adding helpful bacteria? And how does that work?
Hmm.
They're adding it because they're consuming it, so it's going through their guts and then they like poop it out. So
Pooping it
one of
out.
the things about decomposers is that they help unlock the nutrients from the decaying material through the process of them eating it and it going through their digestive
Their
tract.
system. Yeah,
Nice.
Got it.
Yeah,
So it's like vermicompost.
kind of.
kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're just not as voracious as worms. Worms are just like the gold standard of, decomposers.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, so we are talking about ants. So ants are fine in small numbers. They help aerate the compost, and then they also, through just roaming around, they also bring fungi that help create potassium and phosphorus in the compost. Now, when you have excessive amount of ants, that's when you could possibly have issues. So they can impact worm health. Some ants are aggressive. There's various ants that we have here. Actually, there's 12,000 species of ants, but there's 270 species in California. And some of them may be aggressive, and so they might kill the young worms or take their eggs as food for their colony. They generally don't attack larger worms, but if they're killing the babies, they're not reaching their full potential. Also, if you have ant colonies, it indicates that you have a dry pile. essentially, because they like dry, warm places. And then also it means you're not turning enough because they've had time to make a whole nest. And then also when your pile dries out and you have all this rotting material, it attracts the ants. So also I put here, ants are really attracted to what we're calling like green material. So like they really enjoy coffee grounds and like sugary, like complex carbs. So like if you have bread, a lot of breads or tortillas or like sugary compost, they're definitely going to be attracted, especially if your pile dries out. So how you can manage that is you can add water, turn your compost regularly. You can also add nematodes. So you can buy predatory nematodes and they will be predatory, right? So they're the tertiary consumers, so they'll eat other ants, and you can also use diatomaceous earth. And we'll also talk about other ways of deterring these pests and managing later on. But I would recommend doing the turning and doing the water first before you add anything, because just know that if you're adding anything to your pile that can kill the ants, they're also going to be killing beneficial insects.
Hey, Nichelle,
Yes.
can I just make a quick announcement? My meeting is going to end here pretty quickly. There's an
Okay.
unlimited time link in the chat for a new Zoom meeting. Can we have everyone switch over to that one right now?
Probably a good idea.
I just don't want this ending with that link to be gone.
Still sharing.
Is
Okay.
everyone okay with that? Sorry
Yes.
to
So
pivot,
go
y'all.
to the chat and click on this link. Got it.
Yeah, go through the chat, click on the link. Thank you. We'll see y'all
And I'll
there.
be this. Okay. You guys see this? You guys see my screen?
Not yet.
Oh, okay. I think I did.
Yeah, I think it's coming up now.
No, I clicked off of it because I thought I did. Entire screen. Sure. Can everyone see it now?
Yep.
Okay, great. You're up, Ian. I don't know these.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So the reason why we kind of have these as pests is because they really don't add any benefit to the compost pile. I don't know if you noticed in some of the images there, that bottom image is the image of bees moving into someone's uh, compost bin, which clearly I would say that's a very inactive um, pile. For bees to be that far along in building a nest, then you probably haven't turned or moved anything in weeks. But they like warm spaces. They like kind of tight enclosures. Ideally, um, they usually won't inhabit a space where the opening is too much larger than they are, because that would allow other predators to get inside. So if you see them moving in, either you want to seal off the space so that there's no in and out access. But in the worst case scenario, I would just suggest calling a beekeeper and see if we can get them rehoused. Um, Let me see anything else. When you see large swarms of bees, I mean that generally means it's a colony breaking off. So they're usually separating and becoming a new colony. So they're just kind of looking for a place to call home. So usually if you see a large one floating about, stay out of the way. They'll probably be on their way fairly soon. They may stop to rest somewhere in your yard, but most likely they would just move on. Next slide. Centipedes. Centipedes are, I think, one of my favorite, just because of their uh, predatory nature. They're also voracious eaters. Generally, they're hunters. They can damage your plants. Um, but if you have them in there, it's the compost pile. It's kind of a sign that they're ready or has a very low bacterial activity and the temperature. maybe low. So you probably shouldn't find very many. They usually like more of a cool, damp place, not really a warm, damp place. They also eat earthworm. They eat worms and other organisms in your bin. So in low numbers, they're okay. If you have a large number, then that's probably a bad sign. But they're usually pretty territorial also, so there's a good chance you wouldn't see too many in there at once. There are a few poisonous species, but generally the ones that we have that are considered more local, generally their sting would not harm. It will hurt, but it will not uh, harm you. Um, I would put on the glove, pick them up by hand if you want to remove them from your compost pile. And I never tried that, but we have here you can pour soda water on centipede, temporarily stun it. So I haven't tried that, so that might be something cool to try, but I won't. I can't stay up at 100%. I haven't
I
tried
put that in there because apparently
it.
these guys are super fast. So they said if you
Can
pour
be.
soda water real quick, then you have a chance to grab them and remove them. But like we said, we've never tried it.
Yeah. So let us know if you try that and it works, please share. Next slide.
Okay, so cockroaches. So they're fine in small numbers. They're actually very good for your compost. They are recyclers and they actually do help break down the organic matter. They're attracted to warm, humid environments. And also, the cockroaches that you see in your compost pile are outdoor species. They're not the same that live indoors. There's actually 4,600 species of cockroaches, and only 30 are associated with like human habitats in the house. So the ones that you see in your compost pile are outdoor cockroaches, and it's very unlikely that they'll go in your house. So if you see an excessive amount of these guys, your system's probably out of balance. It's probably helpful to turn your pile. Also make sure there's a good ratio of browns to green. And also make sure to bury your food scraps. If there's just a crazy amount stressing you out, you can use roach bait around your traps. Diatomaceous earth. Also, if you have some chickens, apparently they love cockroaches. Also make sure your compost pile has some sort of lid or some sort of like some well-fitting tarp over it. Also, if you can, I know that some people can't, but make sure that the compost pile is away from your home and not up against like a wall of your house. And then also just seal any cracks and crevices to make it, not an easy entry for them. Ian, are you on mute?
Oh, sorry, though. I put it on mute. I was just laughing at the comments in the chat. Yvette was saying that she can't even look at the slides. Too much.
Yes, I'm sorry. Everything is great, but those are the ones for me that get me all
Yeah, they're gross, just in a lot of them, and people just have a very negative. It's just their instinct to be like cockroaches, ew. But they do have a place. It's just you don't want to
Right.
see a lot of cockroaches.
Right. Just
Yeah.
the place is not my house.
Like one or two away from your house, okay, fine. But yeah,
Right.
Absolutely. So, earwigs. Turns out there's 6 species of earwigs. 5 of them are present in California. So there's a chance that if you see an earwig and you think it looks a little different than maybe the one you normally see, there's a good chance it could be another species. They are predators. They do like to eat pests like mites and aphids and fleas, so they could be good for your garden. But the also other thing is that they're also omnivores like isopods, and so they do like flower petals, and they do like some of your small new growth. Um, they tend to be attracted to moist, dark areas. I don't know if you ever looked up and like lifted up a rock or maybe a barbecue grill that you haven't used in a long time. and you just see them kind of break out in large numbers. I did learn that chickens love them. We had a interesting coop that we got from someone who took like an old child's playhouse, and they were when I took it apart, they were in the cracks and crevices, and when they began to fall out, the chickens came running and they had a good time. So chickens could help with the management to some degrees. Also, another way to manage is turn your pile. A temperature above 120 will help mitigate them as an issue. They also, you can plant alyssum, calendula, fennel, and dill. I think the calendula, I would say that works. We have a lot of calendula on our property, and thinking about it, I don't see them very much in that particular part of the yard, so we might have to spread some more of that around.
Oh, it works because it attracts these flies that
Protective
basically.
fly. Yeah. So you can add browse to decrease your moisture level. But I mostly enjoy earwigs, but like I said, in large numbers, I get it why people are not interested. And so we have here is a trap, is the image there of a trap. You could punch a hole in the rim of a small plastic container, add some oil and some soy sauce, then replace the lid and bury the container with the holes level with the top of the soil. So that's an experiment to try if you're up for an experiment.
But also this picture doesn't have the lid. I couldn't find a picture with the lid, but I don't know if there's I've never tried this either, but I don't know if there's like, that could be part of the experiment with the lid or not the lid. Because once they go in the oil and in the soy sauce, they're not coming back out. The oil's to trap them, the soy sauce is to track them. So.
You
Next slide.
can go next. Yeah, next slide. This is me too. I think it is.
Yep.
All right. So, house flies and fruit flies. I know, like I said, generally these are considered pests on, I'll say 9 out of 10 times. But they're both are pollinators. So just as a good note before we go into the other side, flies also help break down organic matter in your compost. They help aerate. Their movement and their droppings left behind kind of help contribute to the decomposition. But the eggs and maggots can be a food source for some of the other things in your garden. So I'm sorry, in your garden, in your compost. Their presence kind of indicates an imbalance